This nurse may have killed over 400 patients, and for 16 years hospitals kept hiring him anyway. Not because they didn't know, but because it was easier to stay silent. At 2:17 a.m., the heart monitor flatlined. No alarms screamed. No doctors rushed in. Because this wasn't an emergency. This was scheduled. Somewhere in the hospital, a man calmly washed his hands, clocked out, and drove home, while a family just floors away was about to learn their loved one would never wake up. For 16 years, he worked the night shift, and no one noticed that death kept following him. Every hospital has a night owl, the nurse who prefers dim lights, empty hallways, and the hum of machines over conversation. The one who volunteers for holidays, the one who's always there when things go wrong. In New Jersey, that nurse was Charles Cullen. Soft-spoken, polite, a man who blended into the background so completely that coworkers described him as forgettable. He wasn't loud. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't argue with doctors or chase authority. He listened. He watched. And he waited. While patients slept, Cullen learned the rhythms of the ICU, the timing of medication rounds, the blind spots in supervision, the unspoken trust that allowed nurses to move freely between rooms. This wasn't a crime scene in the traditional sense. There were no weapons, no struggle, no blood, just IV bags, medication carts, and silence. This wasn't a crime scene in the traditional sense. There were no weapons, no struggle, no blood, just IV bags, medication carts, and silence. For 16 years, Cullen moved from hospital to hospital across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Patients died suddenly. Charts showed nothing unusual. Autopsies raised questions, but never answers. The rooms with the most monitoring somehow became the most dangerous. And by the time anyone started asking why, the number of victims may have already reached into the hundreds. To understand how Charles Cullen killed, you have to understand something terrifyingly simple. He didn't need to touch his victims. Most serial killers leave marks, bruises, wounds, evidence of violence. Cullen left chemistry, the invisible weapon. Instead of attacking patients directly, Cullen targeted the supply chain, the one place no one expected danger. He learned that certain drugs, when administered incorrectly, could cause sudden cardiac arrest while leaving almost no trace. Insulin, digoxin, powerful medications meant to save lives. Cullen would secretly inject these substances into IV saline bags that were supposed to be harmless. Then he placed them back on the shelf. He didn't choose the victim. He chose chance. A nurse would grab a bag. A doctor would approve the drip. A patient would decline rapidly. By the time anyone noticed, the body had already begun to shut down. And Cullen? He was just another nurse responding to the emergency he created. Medical Russian roulette. This method was almost impossible to trace. The drug wasn't prescribed. The patient didn't need it. And Cullen could stand at the bedside, pretending to help, while watching the damage unfold. Sometimes the patient died. Sometimes they didn't. And that uncertainty was part of the thrill. People often call healthcare killers angels of mercy. That label is comforting. It suggests compassion twisted into tragedy. But Charles Cullen wasn't merciful. Outside the hospital, his life was unraveling. failed marriages, custody battles, chronic depression, multiple suicide attempts. In the real world, Cullen felt invisible, but inside the ICE, he was God. He decided when alarms sounded, when chaos erupted, when families got the call, not for attention, not for praise, for control. The hospital gave him structure, authority without scrutiny, power without fingerprints. And no one questioned him, because questioning a nurse meant questioning the system itself. This is the part of the story that's harder to accept than the murders themselves, because Charles Cullen didn't succeed alone. Between 1988 and 2003, Cullen worked at 10 different medical facilities. At nearly every one, there were warning signs. The red flags: diabetic patients with sudden insulin spikes, unusual clusters of deaths during Cullen's shifts, medication discrepancies no one could explain, restricted drugs found in his possession. Doctors noticed, nurses whispered. Why? Because in healthcare, reputation is everything. Admitting a serial killer worked on staff meant lawsuits, loss of accreditation, financial collapse. So hospitals made a choice. They gave Cullen neutral references, quiet terminations, small severance packages, and sent him down the road. This practice has a name: pass the trash. They didn't stop the threat. They relocated it, and patients kept dying. Think about what that means. Somewhere in a boardroom, someone weighed risk versus profit and chose silence. Families were told their loved ones died of natural causes. Charts were closed. Rooms were cleaned. And Cullen was hired again. And again. And again. Each hospital assuming the last one had already dealt with the problem. But no one ever had. Charles Cullen wasn't caught by technology. He was caught by trust. At Somerset Medical Center, Cullen worked alongside a nurse named Amy Loughran. They shared night shifts, coffee breaks, personal stories. Amy was struggling financially, medically, emotionally. Cullen supported her, protected her. He was her closest friend. So when detectives approached Amy with a simple question, "Do you trust him?" her world collapsed. They showed her evidence, drug records, patterns of death. Amy didn't want to believe it, but she did something no hospital administrator ever had. The wire. In a quiet diner, Amy wore a wire. Across the table sat the man she trusted most. She didn't accuse him. She didn't confront him. She listened. And slowly, Cullen talked. He admitted to killing patients, not for money, not for revenge, but because he felt he had to. That recording gave police what they'd been denied for years. Proof. Charles Cullen was arrested in 2003. He eventually confessed to dozens of murders. Investigators believe the true number may never be known. He received multiple life sentences. No parole. No release. But the damage didn't end there. Hospitals were exposed. Families demanded answers. And lawmakers were forced to act. The result? New reporting laws, mandatory background checks, shared employment records across state lines, rules written in blood. Charles Cullen once told investigators, "I thought I was helping, But help doesn't hide. Help doesn't poison. Help doesn't require silence. The families he left behind will never know which decision, which bag, which shift ended their loved one's life. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a nurse. He looked like a nurse. So tonight, if you ever find yourself in a hospital room at 2 a.m., listening to the hum of machines, ask yourself, how many lives were saved by trust, and how many were lost because no one questioned it? Because sometimes, the most dangerous shadow in the room is the one everyone assumes belongs there.